this God actually spoke to them, you know. None of these others have, you know. They still worship their other gods, but you better not mess with this one.
It, that is surprising. You know, that is something that, like you say, they have not become monotheistic in their worship, and perhaps that's all it is. Maybe I can't understand that mindset, that all my other gods that I worship, that know that this is the one, that you know, that they don't turn to that. But you see a lot of that soft desire for God in some of the wording that's there. Go ahead, Paul.
How the culture at this time was working is that, you know, Asher was the god of this region, Marduk was the god of this region, you know, the Egyptians, this was their god of that region, and whatnot. So they were regional gods, not all worldly gods, like we say God is, as God says he is, as well. So for him, they're noticing that there's hard times in Judah, and they do decree, when the decree is written, they're recognizing that people can't do much, grow crops, this, that, or the other thing, and have a sustainable life. So he's seeing it as, well, if we rebuild the temple for the Jews' God, then that area will be successful again, because worship to that God will now be fulfilled, because that is the God of that region. So when Christianity comes along, as we read in Acts, when Paul goes to Athens, it's like, oh, that unknown God, no, he is the only God, and the rest are false. It's one of the many reasons why Christians were hated for so long, because it's like, no, there's many gods, and you know, that's the God of this region, the God of that region, and so on and so
Okay.
forth. So that's one of the earth-shattering things of Christianity.
Okay. Well, and of Judaism, and I think I think you make a good point there. What's it?
Jews were more content with everybody worshiping their false gods, as long as they got to worship their God.
Okay. Well, I think you made a good point there earlier, because maybe that concept is out there, that there are these regional gods, that they wouldn't think of that. But what is God described as? When we see a description, I think we could just pass over it, because we take it as given, that he is the God of heaven and earth, the God of all. And yeah, that's the definition in our minds of a God. He is over all. That's the only way we've known it, to be there. And this, so I think it was another concept.
I didn't write it down this time around, but in our previous study in Ezra and in Nehemiah, these kings also credited their success to this Jehovah God. They knew that their success was based upon that God. They gave him that credit. As a matter of fact, in one of the studies we had, they recognized that if they didn't do that, their failure would come. So they knew that their success was based upon this Jehovah God. I just kind of liked it in verse 11, that he is so strong. He goes out and makes his own statement. I issue a decree that anyone who violates this edict, that we're going to be nailed to your house, and your house will be made a refuge of dung. That's how intense he was about his maintaining his reign. That if you disregard my edict, not only are you dead, we're going to take that, hang you to that piece of wood in your own house and turn it into a pile of refuse. So, but they credited their success to Jehovah God.
Right. Well, and like we said, we did see that. We actually see it happening where the Persians take over. That they actually see that happening. Do you have something else?
Yeah, I think we also ought to understand that God put this in his mind and heart. And I seem to remember, although I can't find it, where something is said about that God put it in the heart of Darius
Right.
Mhm.
to write this. And so if he did that, he gave them the right words to put down.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, and, you know, it's almost like code, isn't it? It's almost like you can pick up the certain phrases in there when the sweet smelling aroma and each individual thing that they would need for their sacrifices and, you know, cubits, you know. Hey, it's kind of a code thing. Oh, yeah, that I remember that from the Holy Scriptures. And yeah, that was, Paul hit on the other thing I was going to bring up there, Acts 17 and 22, when Paul is talking to the Athenians, saying that I see in all things you are religious. And, you know, they have this fervor, this understanding of God, and this is somewhat of what Paul writes in the first chapter of Romans about people that have an understanding of God and maybe not all the details. Maybe they just need it explained more fully to them. Mike?
And this is God keeping his promise. Ezra chapter 1, verse 1, now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent the proclamation throughout. So it's just God keeping his promise, and he puts those words into King Cyrus to write this decree and to begin the rest of Ezra and Nehemiah's chapter. Right?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty amazing to see the effect he can have, and I guess that's the kind of thing I want us to be open to, both in our study of the Scriptures, but in our walk of life, is to be listening for that. What does God have planned for this? Why are we here today? Why, you know, when you look at a situation you're in, why is this happening? And it can be comforting to know that there's there for a reason, whatever it should turn out to be. And hopefully we're aware of it and we can react properly when the time comes. So let's see what. I had a bunch of notes in here about some of the background on Ahasuerus. And he's known as Xerxes in the Greek. And so that's, and it's interesting that they have that. You see these different empires that are taking over, that are changing the landscape. Ahasuerus' empire at that time reigned from India to Ethiopia, so far to the east, and then to the west into Africa and south. And they did mention that the Greek territories were a problem for him. And that was one of the things, the timing of the writing of this, they think it was sometime before 300 BC, because that's when the Greeks would have had a greater influence, and it probably would have been written in Greek, had it been written after that time. Oh, and there was also, he mentions in here about the fire destroying the palace at Susa, which has a different name. What is it? Shushan, I think it is here, in which anyway, one of the capital cities of Persia at that time. But yeah, then after this time, we see the Greeks taking over, and that was described to me as also an unwritten act of God. The Greeks, as they come over and take this region, what they did was they unified everyone with a language, simplifying communication. And then as the Romans take over, they built roads. They created cities. They established the infrastructure. What happened then? All worked toward the spreading of the gospel. Because with a common language, with ease of travel, it made it easier for these people to travel around to spread the word. that was there. So we're not given that information that it's at the hand of God, but we can see His handiwork there and how it would work in His favor.
The fact that
Right.
Ahasuerus is identified as Xerxes makes me wonder if it was written late enough that the Greek influence was stronger. In other words, if it was written shortly after the events here, you would think that the name Xerxes would. We do see this Xerxes, don't we, in there? Or do we not?
Mine says Ahasuerus, and
It depends on your translation.
oh, okay,
Translations use Xerxes and some use Ahasuerus.
Okay.
that's interesting. Does yours say Xerxes in it?
No, mine doesn't.
Maybe it does. The newer ones.
Oh, okay. No, I was just wondering about that because of, we both work off of the New King James, but I've noticed differences with his New King James and my New King James in some spots.
Old New King James.
The old New King James, I got the new King James. Revised and improved. Okay. All right. So anyway, they believe that these events of Esther took place during this time period that we show there in the fifth row of this table that he has, Ahasuerus, the son of Darius, and good luck with the Persian name. I guess we'll leave that one alone. All right. Anybody else have anything more on research background stuff?
One final thing that just keeps me in my time frame, you remember they had gone back, they've started the rebuild, they stopped the rebuild because of the hooligans of the area frightened them, so they stopped the rebuild. They complete the rebuild in 516. So as we get to the end of chapter 6, temple's completed, and then chapter 7 comes in and Ezra now comes into the picture. So they've just finished the completion of the temple, and now we get this story of Ahasuerus and Esther that we're getting into. So it's, at least while I'm back in Jerusalem, that's been completed. Now we're back over here now.
Right, and say meanwhile back at the ranch,
Back at the ranch,
Yeah.
we get Ahasuerus and this story that we're getting into.
and all these things that are taking place, and I guess it gives a greater understanding when we talk later about the decree going wide and the events of things happening away from the capital city. Laura, did you?
So I don't know if anyone did any searches on, they've done archaeological findings of this palace, and they have models of what they believe it was, what it looked like. And I know I went to Oriental Institute once, it's not called that anymore, but down in Chicago, and they had pieces that would have been hanging on the walls in the time of Esther. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
pretty cool to know that they've been able to find the ruins of this palace and know where it was and what it looked like.
That's amazing to think of that, and how does that happen? How do these hangings that were there and, a building dilapidates, we know that. How does all that get left behind? But yeah, to think of these things that are happening in the Bible. Has everybody seen this? Okay. Sorry, it's much bigger on the back screen over here. It's a lot of fun. So I guess we should mention that in this book, this is one of I think I said it incorrectly before, but this is one of two books in which God's name is not mentioned. Does anyone know the other one? This is, I didn't look through it. The Song of Solomon. Apparently, God's name is not mentioned. So now we give you something to look up. Try to research that. Al's looking at me incredulously. So maybe it's a translation, right? Okay. Now, when Al gave me the material for this, he gave me two different versions to choose from, and there was one that had a lot of commentary from the author in there, and then another one in which we just put the scripture for that chapter, that section, on the back side, and I decided to just go generally with the scripture that's there. That way we can look at that. Do you know this is New King James then? That the scripture that's in here, so maybe that'll be easier for you to see some differences right off the bat. But I kept the commentary to myself, so I said we'll put that in the teachers edition. And so I kind of weave that into here, so to have that, rather than, just us reading through all of his comments, we would just have the words of the Bible there. I suppose with that, we could go ahead and get started on chapter 1 of this, and see how far we get. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this was the Ahasuerus who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan, the citadel, that in the 3rd year of his reign he made a feast for all his officials and servants, the powers of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces being before him, when he showed the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty for many days, 180 days in all. And when these days were completed, the king made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present in Shushan the citadel, from great to small, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white and blue linen curtains fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple on silver rods and marble pillars, and the couches were of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of alabaster, turquoise, and white and black marble. And they served drinks in golden vessels, each vessel being different from the other, with royal wine in abundance, according to the generosity of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not compulsory, for so the king had ordered all the officers of his household that they should do according to each man's pleasure. I just want to go ahead and stop there as we're talking about this feast that he had, this celebration. It's interesting to me that this was happening at a time when, like we mentioned earlier, he was having difficulty with the Greeks. He was having difficulty militarily taking over the Greeks, and the theory here is that he was preparing for another offensive, that he was going to need the help of others who were around him, and this is one way of gathering that. It's somewhat of a benefit, I guess, this feast. And they believe that the 180 days, rather than that being just one long party, a 6-month-long party, that was encompassing all this time in which he's bringing in these nobles, showing them his might, and perhaps trying to drum up support for his kingdom. That was a theory of it anyway, because it does seem quite a long time to have one continuous party for 180 days. But then even a week-long party, the second one was conducted. This included the commoners who are around. He gives us a description of his court, the grandeur of that citadel that he had, and the opulence that they had, the golden vessels, each one crafted differently. Another thing that strikes me is the discussion about the drinking in here, that it was there, right? And that's fairly normal. We would see in a secular party to have drinking, and to if the people want to impress the people, they have the wine or other drinks that they would have. They would try to impress their friends with the quality that's there. Remember in the wedding at Cain, the master there was surprised that they kept the best wine for last, the wine that Jesus made, right? That this would be a common thing. But the fact that they mentioned that it was not compulsory, and it's interesting. We see commercials all the time for different drinks and all that, right? That we usually wouldn't have anything to do with, but you don't see them saying you don't have to if you don't want to. It's okay not to drink our product, right? They're trying to promote their product. Here, it's giving that as giving that as an option. What did you think of that, Judy? Did you have something?
Yeah, when I first read that, I put the emphasis on that they could drink all they wanted to.
Well, that's true. You could
Yeah.
as much as you want.
But then as I went back and then answering questions and studying it, really the emphasis I think was on, clearly there were people there that didn't like to drink but had to. So at this feast, you don't have to. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that they would feel compelled to do it. Peer pressure, right? You would think it would be that, or fear of, okay. I'm sorry. I got Hulu, Roku is behind me over, behind you guys. Anyway, I forget what I was saying here. Paul, get me out of here.
Well, back then they had two gods for alcohol. There was a beer god and there was a wine god. And wine was held in higher regards because it was rarer than beer. Because you had all these wheat fields and barley fields, so not that hard to make beer compared to trying to make wine at the time. So in a way, for them saying you don't have to drink it, well, there's not as much wine as there would be beer, so now I can have more wine because you decided you didn't have to drink.
Well, that's one way of looking at it, I guess. It leaves more for me. Go, Mike.
Well, I think when you go back and try to look at some of the history behind certain banquets and festivals, there are things that are considered mandatory, perhaps. And so even at this type of banquet where the king is trying to gather greater allies for fear of the Greeks, as you mentioned, that at these banquets there are expectations and standards and etiquettes. And one of those would be, in perhaps our current example would be people raising a toast at a wedding or something like that, and everybody takes their glass, because that's proper etiquette. And so perhaps in this first feast, that was the etiquettes. On the second one, he's saying, you don't have to follow the etiquette rules. It's not a black tie and coat entrance only type of thing. That here the drinking was not compulsory in this second festival that he's given. That's how I kind of read it. So when he says it's not compulsory, that they're kind of loosening up the guidelines before the king, because again you're before the king, and he dictates everything. Obviously, we get into the issue of what he's trying to dictate next about showing off his queen. Right, and so there are rules and expectations and guidelines. And I think that's what, when I looked at this part, like, it's not compulsory. Well, what's compulsory mean? It's mandatory. So maybe it's that type of guideline raise your
Right.
glass, everyone fill in the glass, we're gonna give a toast to whatever it's gonna be, and that's the expectation. That's how I kinda looked at, when I read this, and kinda looked at, what does that really mean, how does that play out?
Right,
That's where I
'cause
went with it.
it does seem a strange item to stress in there. And, but it does show consideration for conscience, the conscience of the people that are there, that they don't, I don't know. I guess that's what I read into it, was that he was being considerate of people's conscience. Paul, I think you had somewhere.
And for that 180-day banquet, Mike was saying that it was most likely, convincing people for this great campaign after they failed the first time. There's so many people in the world nowadays, and each country has men and women who just serve in the military, and that's their job currently. One family for farmers can feed over 500 families. We have that technology, and we have enough people to where certain individuals can specialize in something, and that's
Okay.
their job to society. Back then, with population being a lot lower than it is today, after the campaign season, the military would disband and have to go help in the fields and other things around the community as well. So they were not conscripted soldiers as we think of nowadays, where they're doing military things year-round. So for him to gather the nobles and other high-ranking individuals in society, kings would have to campaign to say, hey, I want to go take over so-and-so, but I need you to go to your people and give me 2,000 of your best fighting men. And the noble had the right to say, no, because I need them right now because we have this canal project going on, just so I can have a better yield next season.
Okay,
So,
well,
kings were powerful,
yeah,
but they also had limitations. And it really wasn't until around World War I where standing armies truly kept happening. Now, like big standing armies.
okay,
Obviously there'd always be the general and a few people doing military things throughout history.
okay.
Protecting the ammunition and stuff. But for the most part, as we think of it as America and the standing military today, it was not so.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a definitely different perspective. What we would see and the needs that they would have would be different. Al, did you have something?
Yeah, considering the not being compulsory, the drinking not being compulsory, someone may have touched on this, but sometimes people perhaps considered it an insult if they were offered a drink and they refused. And there's also the possibility, since this feast, this particular feast was one where all the people were invited, high and low, that would include Jews, who might not want to honor the, well, they may have, the wine may have been offered to a god, for instance, or something
Okay.
like that. And so I kind of look at it as, that's God again, kind of inspiring Darius to protect his people.
Right, that he would, right, it could again be God working in to create that consideration for them. And the thing we would think of first, say the Jewish population may also have been invited, may have been participant in this feast, would be the food, right? Wouldn't the food be the greater concern for them? And as we saw with Daniel originally, with not wanting to take. Now, there it wasn't specified what it was about the food that he didn't want. I don't think it did. I don't think it ever specified. You know, they only ate pork, and he was trying to avoid that. But rather, it was something about it. He didn't feel comfortable with it, and so he was staying away from it. Okay. Was there anything else on that section there? If not, we can move on with the next thing, and we have about 5 more minutes here, so to speak. Picking up again in verse 9. Right. Yeah. Queen Vashti also made a feast for the women in the royal palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown, in order to show her beauty to the people and to the officials, for she was beautiful to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, brought by his eunuchs. Therefore the king was furious, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those closest to him being Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs? And Memucan answered before the king and the princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also the princes and all the people who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree, which he will make, is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king, and the princes and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be master of his own house and speak in the language of his own people. So we see the king. Seems like things were going well, according to his desire to have this great feast and to make this great display before the people. In my mind, it would be rather impressive to be able to keep upbeat for a 7-day period like that. known some parties, even just regular get-togethers, everything's going great, but then you try to extend it a little too long, and becomes wearisome, becomes difficult, especially when alcohol is involved, that it turns south. A little bit. I had a personal experience with that. I was on a business trip. We were in Berlin, and it was at the end of September, and of course Munich has Oktoberfest at that time. And my boss and I went down there by train, and on our way to Switzerland, where we were going to meet our customers. And on a Friday, we went there, saw Oktoberfest. It's like a great big fair. Obviously, a lot of beer and everything. Well, this isn't too bad. People seem to be having a good time, and it's pretty mellow, and people are enjoying themselves. And, the next morning I said, well, I need to get down to Schaffhausen because I'm going to be preaching with to the congregation there. And so I need to be able to get ready, so I'm not going to hang around the next day. And when he met up with me later on Sunday, he said, you made the right choice. The first day, things weren't too bad. The second day, there was a lot of fights. There's a lot of the disruption, a lot more of what you would expect. I kind of pictured, if you remember the cartoon Pinocchio, we're on that island where everything is great and the boys are all having fun and stuff, and eventually they turn into donkeys. Yes, and so the Munich people do too, apparently. So after too much time. Oh, look at that, I'm saved by the bell. So with that, we will talking about bad decisions. We will talk more next Sunday about the king and his decrees.